Outside the Graves estate, an April morning lay shrouded in a light mist. The sky was gray, leaves were turning yellow, and the distant hillside trees stood still, as if sensing something imminent. Elena Whitmore stepped out of a weathered car onto the gravel driveway of Thornvale Hall, one of New York State's most secluded mansions. Her light gray linen dress and faded blue summer coat made her resemble a modest employee rather than an heiress. Her neatly tied hair was in a bun, revealing a makeup-free face that nonetheless held an undeniable allure. Over her shoulder, she carried a small hand-stitched fabric bag, a pure accent amidst the opulence. The mahogany doors opened, and Elena entered a cream and gold hallway. Art adorned the walls. Crystal chandeliers cast reflections on marble details. Everything exuded luxury and isolation. The living room was already full. Over 40 faces, some in expensive suits, others in high-end silk dresses, and some adorned with sparkling diamond jewelry. They all shared a common goal to claim a portion of Nathaniel Graves's vast estate. Elena moved quietly, leaving behind a tall window overlooking the misty hills. No one greeted her. No one inquired. "Looks like the help," came the voice of Bradley Vance, a distant cousin of the Graves family. He wore a Rolex, a navy suit, and a half-smile. Sienna Vance, Bradley's sister, shrugged. "Or an ex-lover here to beg for a share." Her voice was sharp and venomous. Elena heard clearly, but only tilted her head slightly, adjusting the strap of her fabric bag. At that moment she seemed out of place, but in truth, Elena Whitmore stood exactly where she belonged. The woman scorned by the entire room just a minute ago was in fact the legal wife of the man they were all vying to inherit from. And this gathering was merely the beginning of a meticulously orchestrated play. Glasses clinked, hollow greetings echoed like an exhibition of wealth and ambition. Elena chose to stand in a corner near the window. Unnoticed yet, whispers about her spread throughout the room. Tessa Monroe, Nathaniel's niece, a digital media startup executive and TikTok star, squinted at Elena from afar and smirked. Probably one of his charity cases. "Look at that bag, looks like she's carrying lunch." Jade Porter, former CFO assistant at Graves Corp, giggled. "Bet she's here to ask for some cash, poor thing." Tessa's phone buzzed. She snapped a photo of Elena and whispered, "Graves' inheritance, Butcher's fashion disaster." Caption this, "A nobody dreaming among sharks." Those around Tessa burst into laughter. Others raised their phones, joining the mockery trend. Elena stood still, neither bowing her head nor turning away. Her eyes gleamed slightly as if memorizing every face, every voice. Colin Prescott. Another cousin stealthily took a napkin from the buffet table, pulled a marker from his suit pocket, wrote "charity case" in bold letters, and gently attached it to Elena's bag strap without her noticing. A laugh erupted. All eyes turned to the bag. Tessa clapped, recording the crowd's reaction, while Jade whispered gleefully, "Why, she's becoming the joke, and she doesn't even know it." The mockery was no longer subtle. It had become a collective performance with Elena as the uninvited main character. Elena lightly tightened her bag strap, her gaze briefly flicking to a corner of the ceiling where a red light blinked. She knew it was recording live, and she knew someone was watching. The only person besides her who knew the entire plan. At exactly 10:00 a.m., not a minute early or late, the reading room door opened. All eyes turned to the man entering salt and pepper hair, a pristine gray suit, and a familiar mahogany leather briefcase. Malcolm Reed, Nathaniel Graves's lawyer, was the holder of the official will. He neither smiled nor greeted me. He placed the briefcase on the long table in the center of the room, opened it, and took out a thick envelope sealed with red wax. The atmosphere turned eerily silent. Those who had been laughing and chatting adjusted their postures, smoothed their hair, clasped their hands, preparing for the moment they believed would be their glory. Malcolm hadn't spoken a word when a loud, indignant voice rang out. "I object. That woman has no right to be here." The room jolted. Martin Langston, a former investor in Graves Corp, stood abruptly. His face was flushed, finger pointing directly at Elena. Nathaniel would never let someone like her near his estate. "She's a fraud, definitely here to swindle money." Vivian Archer, Martin's wife wearing a sparkling emerald necklace, nodded in agreement. "She looks like she picked up an invitation from the gate. No way she's close family. It colt boisizi with this doubts." The room buzzed with whispers. The outrage escalated rapidly. No one asked for the truth. No one waited for an explanation. They unanimously condemned Elena for her modest appearance and silence. But Elena didn't react. Her eyes remained fixed on the envelope in Malcolm's hand. Amidst the chaos, she was the focal point of the anger, but also the only one not swept away. She knew what was coming, and it would change everything. The room's atmosphere nearly froze as Malcolm Reed raised the red wax-sealed envelope. He placed it on the walnut table, then slowly, carefully, as if opening a door between past and present, broke the seal. The seal broke, revealing thick ivory paper with gilded corners. Malcolm donned his glasses and scanned each line before speaking in a deep, clear, unmistakable voice. "This is the final and legal will of Nathaniel Graves, signed and authenticated 3 years ago." All eyes suddenly stopped moving. Even phones were no longer raised. Tessa stopped recording. Jade ceased taking notes. Some even held their breath. In this document, Malcolm continued, "Mr. Graves leaves no assets, shares, real estate, or financial interests to family members, investors, or familiar associates." A wave of shock rippled through the room like an electric jolt. Bradley Vance's lips twitched. At what none of us... Malcolm did not respond. He continued reading, his voice steady. "I, Nathaniel Graves, being of sound mind, leave all assets, company shares, real estate, and intellectual property to one person, the one who stood by me, not for fame or money, but for the purest love, my wife Elena Whitmore." A deadly silence. Then an uproar. Tessa dropped her phone. Martin Langston sprang up like a spring roaring. "And this is a joke. Nathaniel had no wife. We've never met her. This is a forgery. Or del Balkist Alpesista Pastor." Vivian Archer turned pale. "Impossible. Someone like that, how could she be his legal wife?" Elena remained still. Her eyes briefly met Malcolm's, a fleeting, discreet signal. Malcolm placed his hand on the briefcase, opened it, and took out a stack of documents. "Here is the marriage certificate signed 7 years ago, complete with signatures, witnesses, and legal confirmation, accompanied by wedding photos, handwritten letters, and joint bank account, copies opened by Mr. Graves. All have been legally and handwriting verified." He held up a photo, Nathaniel in a simple suit arm, around Elena, who wore an elegant white dress. They stood before a small city courthouse. Radiant, smiles, sincere gazes. Tessa whispered, "Unbelievable." Jade slumped into her seat as if drained of all strength. Bradley stammered, "We had no idea, none at all." Elena stepped forward. Her flat shoes made no sound, but each step, each movement now weighed heavily on the space. Everything was collapsing, not because someone loudly demanded rights, but because a woman had remained silent long enough. The room's air felt vacuumed. The earlier mockery had vanished, replaced by eyes glued to each piece of evidence Malcolm presented. He laid each document on the table, marriage certificates, bank statements, handwritten letters, all carefully laminated and officially stamped. Malcolm continued, "This is a letter Nathaniel wrote to Elena 1 month after their marriage. Handwriting, fingerprints, and content have been verified by independent legal experts." Jade frowned, her voice weak. But why did he never introduce her? Why keep it secret all these years? Malcolm didn't answer. Instead, he turned on a small projector placed in the center of the table. An image appeared on the screen behind him, a grainy phone video. Nathaniel and Elena stood on the steps of the Chelsea County Supreme Court. He wore a white shirt, Elena a simple dress. They looked at each other, smiled, and kissed amidst the London autumn. 2 witnesses behind them, Joanna Hill and Daniel Fry, clapped. Tessa stepped back, her voice hoarse. "No, is this real?" Colin Prescott, who had earlier attached the mocking note to Elena's bag, lowered his head. The murmurs gradually faded. On the screen, Nathaniel smiled, a rare, simple smile, devoid of power, filled only with happiness. Malcolm turned back to the crowd. "She doesn't need to prove anything, but Mr. Graves prepared everything knowing this day would come." A brief silence. Elena finally spoke. Her voice was soft but resonant. "I didn't come to fight. I came to see who truly mourned Nathaniel or just mourned the wealth he left behind." No one dared respond. Those who had insulted her now stood in the light of evidence, left with nothing to cling to. And Elena, still standing there without shouting or scrambling, was now the irreplaceable center of this will reading. The room was still, as if time itself had frozen. Elena stood upright, eyes unblinking, her gaze gliding across each face in the hall. She didn't need to be angry. She didn't need to shout. Her very presence, calm to the point of chilling, was enough to suffocate the air around them. "I know what everyone here thinks of me," Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it echoed like a bell in a stone cathedral. An unknown woman, a shadow who wandered into a world of power and wealth. Bradley rolled his eyes, trying to salvage some semblance of pride. But she didn't look at him. Elena continued. I don't blame you for not recognizing me. I blame you for not bothering to ask. Tessa turned away, her nose reddening. Jade clutched her handbag tightly. Colin stared at the floor as though hoping it might swallow him whole. You assumed you had the right, Elena said, just because you wore better suits, more expensive shoes, and sat closer to the will. But Nathaniel saw past all of that. He knew that fame is the first coat of paint that fades when people show their true nature. She stepped forward, unhurried, unshaken. The chandelier's light fell on her hair, casting a faint ethereal halo. I was his wife. We married without ceremony, without press, without the need for anyone to know, except the love between us. Her voice was steady, each word falling like a chisel against the false pride in the room. We lived simply. We kept our secret because we wanted peace. Not everyone needs the world's applause to feel worthy. Vivian choked out her voice, wavering. Then why did you come today? Why show up among us like this? Elena turned to her, her eyes briefly softening, then hardening again. Because I wanted to look into each of your eyes and see who still had a heart and who only had claws. Each word, each breath stripped away the masks in the room. Everyone lowered their gaze, avoiding her eyes. No one could stand firm before a woman who spoke no louder than a whisper, yet carried the weight of truth. No one in the room noticed the tiny red light blinking in the corner of the ceiling, a live stream camera quietly running as silently as the woman who had just spoken. Elena turned calmly, reaching into her fabric bag and pulling out a small remote no one had seen until now. She pressed a button. The mechanical whir of a screen descending from the ceiling startled a few guests. Tessa stepped back instinctively, her hand clenching her phone. Jade looked around nervously as if the walls themselves were closing in. The screen lit up, a live feed. A small room appeared warmly lit with a bookshelf and a cactus in the background. And then, a familiar face. Nathaniel Graves. Still, the same piercing eyes, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed. He sat back in a leather chair, wearing a dark brown cardigan, no longer the flashy financial mogul, but a real human being. The room held its breath. Nathaniel looked straight into the camera and spoke, his voice calm, clear, and firm. Good morning. I suppose I've surprised you all. No one responded, eyes widened in disbelief as if under a spell. Some of you may have wished me dead. Some of you might think this is an old recording. But no, it's live. I'm alive. Malcolm nodded to confirm, and the screen displayed the current timestamp, 10:42 a.m., today. Nathaniel continued, I disappeared to observe the truth, to see who you all became when the lights dimmed, who stood tall when there was nothing left to fight for, and who showed their true colors when they thought no one was watching. He glanced off screen, then nodded. Elena, standing in the room, approached the screen. She didn't speak, simply stood beside it. A mirrored image, real and virtual, but of the same essence, truth. Nathaniel smiled faintly for the first time that morning. Elena knew about this plan. It was her idea, not out of distrust, but out of hope. Hope that someone among you might prove worthy of trust. His tone darkened slightly. Unfortunately, most of you failed. Vivian gasped, covering her mouth. Bradley stumbled back into a chair. Tessa began to sob silently. Nathaniel's voice hardened. Elena has nothing to prove to you. But today I want the world, and especially those closest to me, to see that she is the only one who stood by me. Not for wealth, not for fame, but for who I truly am. The screen's glow lit Elena's face, still calm, still composed. But now she stood at the very center of the undeniable truth. Nathaniel took a deep breath on the screen. Behind him, the hands of an analog clock struck exactly 10:45. And now, he said, comes the part none of you want to hear, but all of you need to. Malcolm stood drawing a second sealed document from his briefcase, this one marked with a matching red wax seal. He nodded toward the screen, then began reading. Supplementary addendum to the will. Any individual who engages in acts of insult, degradation, or character attacks against Elena Whitmore, my lawful wife, during the reading of this, shall be immediately disqualified from all inheritance rights in any form. A wave of fear rippled through the room. All eyes locked onto Malcolm as he began naming names, his voice like a gavel hitting the bench. Bradley Vance, Jade Porter, Tessa Monroe, Colin Prescott, Vivian Archer, Martin Langston, and 3 others who were complicit in acts of public humiliation, also disqualified from the inheritance. Whimpers echoed. Tessa collapsed into her seat. Lips trembling, Colin muttered, "No way. I was just joking." Nathaniel's voice resumed on the screen. "This is not a joke. No one has the right to belittle the woman I love, especially when they never gave her the chance to be understood." A security guard appeared at the door, quiet but imposing. Jade shot up from her seat in a panic. "Wait, I didn't mean anything bad. I didn't know who she was." Elena raised her head, her expression void of rage, only filled with a quiet, deep sorrow. "Because I didn't dress like you, because I didn't flaunt like you. That was enough for you to make me your target." Malcolm nodded toward the guard. One by one, those named were escorted out. Each departing step left behind whispers, sobs, and the sound of collapse. Some pleaded, some still tried to justify their actions. But at this moment, power no longer belonged to them. Elena stood tall, saying nothing further. Justice, quiet but sharp as steel, had been served. The grand reading room now stood half empty, weighed down, like the aftermath of a storm. Only those who had not ridiculed her remained, and none were certain they still held a place in the will. Malcolm spoke slowly. "We will now proceed with the remaining parts of the will." Elena stepped back beside the table. She was no longer the woman scorned. She stood now like a quiet arbiter of justice, her expression calmer, gentler, but still untouchable to most in the room. Nathaniel reappeared on the screen, his voice returning. "There are 3 people I believe acted with dignity and integrity, not because they knew who Elena was, but because of who they are." Malcolm offered a small smile, then read aloud. "Sarah Ellis, my former private nurse." A silver-haired woman stood overwhelmed with emotion. "Michael Reed, the retired librarian of the public library I once frequented and a witness at our wedding." Michael bowed his head quietly. He had remained silent the entire time, his gaze respectful from the moment Elena arrived. "And Anna Rosario, the caretaker of the back garden here at the estate." A woman in a simple brown cotton blouse who had been standing by the door was startled at the sound of her name. Nathaniel nodded on the screen. "These 3 shall each receive a portion of the estate, not as a reward, but as recognition of their unconditional kindness. They didn't turn away when they saw someone being disrespected." Elena looked at them, eyes glistening. "Thank you for seeing me as a human being." A profound silence settled over the room. No one objected. No one resented. Only one truth remained. Kindness is the most lasting inheritance a person can leave. Malcolm closed the will, his voice somber. "This concludes the formal reading of the will." Elena looked up at Nathaniel's image on the screen. They said nothing, but everyone could see. It was a connection built on something stronger than any fortune, a love that needed no spectacle, no proof. As the screen faded and Nathaniel's face dissolved into a soft white glow, a weight lifted from the room, not a feeling of loss, but a necessary ending to the illusions that had cracked. Elena stood quietly for a moment. She looked around not to check, not to claim victory, but as if imprinting the final scene of a play in which she had been both lead and silent director. She picked up her fabric bag, a small item that had been mocked, now worth more than any luxury purse in the room. No one spoke as she walked, no more condescension in their eyes, only silence, part regret, part reverence. Each step she took echoed softly against the marble floor. Through the tall windows, midday light streamed in. It was no longer misty like when she arrived. Sunlight touched her shoulders, making her figure glow against the fading shadows. Sarah, Michael, and Anna bowed their heads quietly. They didn't need to say a word. She smiled at them, the first true smile of this long morning. As she crossed the threshold of the Graves estate, Elena did not look back. She had no reason to. This was once a place of judgment. But now she walked away, not just as an heir. She walked away as the living symbol of what money could never buy: dignity. Outside, a soft breeze stirred. On the hilltop, the grass bowed in one direction, as if to honor a woman who had walked through a storm without losing herself. She headed toward the old car that still waited for her, her hand still holding that fabric bag. But inside that bag weren't just humble belongings. It carried silent pride and a heart that never stopped believing in the goodness of people. No need for validation, no business card, no applause. Elena Whitmore had walked out of that room as a victor for eternity.